Assalamu alaikum and good greetings. So today we'll be watching a video titled Christian Reads Quran episode 7. This is again by Dex Vanderwell. We have watched all the 6 previous episodes. Feel free to watch them in the description box below. Without further ado, let's watch.
All right, what's up, people? My name is Dax. Welcome to my channel. On this channel, I like to compare Christianity and Islam, the two largest religions in the world. And currently, we're kicking things off, really kicking this whole channel off with a series called Christian Reads Quran. This is episode 7. Today, we're going over surahs 20, 21, 22. And basically, the idea and heart behind the series is, as a Christian, I'm reading the Quran, the holy book of Islam, and I'm leaving comments, questions, and objections along the way from a Christian perspective. So I'm reading the Quran, and as I'm reading the Quran, there's things that are popping into my mind, questions about Christian doctrine, about Islamic theology, comparing these religions, and just trying to understand the claims of these religions and the differences, the commonalities, etc. So this is episode 7. Thank you if you've been following along. I hope you've been enjoying. Real quick, an episode 6 highlight, just a highlight from last episode. If you didn't see it, go watch that one. If you didn't see that one, go watch 5 or 4, 3, 2, 1. You should probably start at the beginning and then catch up to where we now are. But my episode 6 highlight is basically, there was a part of last video where I talked about the idea of Allah having a child. And so I posed the question, why do Muslims accept Jesus as a prophet when he clearly claimed to be the son of God?
Of course, if you're interested in my response to that, watch the reaction to episode 6.
So the reason I ask this question is because the Quran denies that God has a son, yet Jesus claimed to be the son of God.
The statement like he's mentioning here is assuming the watcher are Christian, because he said Quran says this, while Jesus claimed to be son of God only accepted by Christianity or those who believe in the Bible, right? So interesting way of asking question, assuming the view always already believe in the Bible when I don't. So that's interesting.
So I felt like there was this, it seems like there's this tension, right? If Jesus is a prophet, yet he claimed to be a son of God, the thing that the Quran denies exists, then how do Muslims understand that? How do they accept that? So from that,
it's not really a challenge to understand how Muslims accept it when you know Muslims don't really accept the Bible to be valid or reliable source to begin with.
There were 2 responses that Muslims gave. The first response that a lot of Muslims gave was, did Jesus even claim to be the son of God? They said, well, Jesus didn't clearly claim to be the son of God in the Gospels. That was response number 1, which I think is a little bit weaker. But then the second response was, well, sure, maybe Jesus claimed to be the son of God, but a lot of people claim to be the son of God. In the Old Testament, a lot of people are called sons of God. The nation of Israel is called the sons of God. A bunch of people are called sons of God. So this
interesting that both the only 2 possibility that he have encountered do not include what I've just said, because number 1 is more of accepting the Bible while saying that in the Bible Jesus didn't really claim to be God. Number 2 is obvious that many people are being called son of God in the Bible. That's true. But to put the Bible as a required prerequisite before you evaluate the Quran in itself is problematic in my view, academically.
The second response from Muslims was basically, sure, Jesus claimed to be the son of God, but that's not anything special. That's not a unique claim because a lot of people are the son of God. Which I think that's the better response. First of all, if you don't think Jesus claimed to be the son of God at all, you haven't read the Gospels, right? It's clear Jesus, he's identified as the son of God by his direct followers. People call him the son of God. He literally says, I am. He accepts being called the son of God. He makes it clear. He calls God Abba, which is this intimate connection of father-son. He's claiming to have this unique relationship with the Father, being the son of God. And we'll look at a verse in a second. And apart from that,
So I assume that this video is more valid for those Christian thinking to become Muslim then, because the basis is you already accept the gospel, right?
Response of, well, a lot of people claim to be the son of God, so even if Jesus did, it's not that special. I think that's a better response, and that actually challenged me a little bit, made me dig a little deeper. But it's really about the context of how Jesus calls himself the son of God. When you look at how he's using this title, son of God, he's not using it in a general sense that people used it in the Old Testament. Like there's no way you can conclude that. And so one verse I want to reference is Mark 14:62. Since this is a series about the Quran, I don't want to go too deep into these arguments because I'm just sort of wasting time. I want to talk about the Quran. But if you don't think Jesus claimed to be the son of God, and if you don't think that claim was special or unique, I encourage you to go study Mark 14:62. The high priest says to Jesus, are you the Messiah, the son of the Blessed One, the son of God? And Jesus says, I am. He says, I am. And then he says, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, coming on the clouds of heaven. which is a direct reference from the Old Testament. Basically, in this verse,
Okay, this verse I have watched and reacted to when it is delivered by Nabil Qureshi, right? So I think the issue is because Nabil Qureshi's point is more of Jesus saying Jesus as Son of God, or seeing the phrase Son of God to Jesus in the Bible is nothing about him being God, while the Son of Man is the one that indicate that he is actually God. So that's the full, because he says that many Christians get it wrong. This is Nabil Qureshi's word, not mine. He said Nabil Qureshi said that Nabil Qureshi said that many Christians think Son of God in the Bible is a proof that Jesus is God, while that's incorrect. While Jesus claimed to be the Son of Man in that book is the indicator that he is, because it's besides God, etc., right? But either way, I have addressed those biblical verse in a video. If you wish to watch it, I'll try, feel free to comment down below in case I forgot to include it in the description. Normally I would forget, because when I edit all of these videos, it's sometime after I recorded it. So yeah,
Mark 14:62. Go look it up. I mean, if you're like, Dax, I don't believe you, I'm telling you, go study it. Go look at Mark 14:62. Go read commentaries on it. Jesus, he accepts being the Son of God.
Anyway, so again, to my initial point about all of this is that if I don't really put the Bible as a reliable source to begin with, all of this does not really make any point to me, right? Because meaning that, if you don't think I'm telling the truth, read the gospel. But first, you have to show to me that there's a point, there's a reason for me to refer to the gospel in the first place before going to the Quran, right?
And then, through his other claims, he says that he will be worshipped alongside God and that he will share the throne of God. So this is why I don't think saying, oh, sure, he said he's the Son of God, but that's nothing special. No. He says yes to being the Son of God, but also he says he will be worshipped and he will reign alongside the Father on his throne. He's not just saying he's the Son of God in some meaningless Old Testament sense that other people say. His claims are unique. And so that's why I think this is a good question. Because if you look at the claims of Jesus, I think they're special, they're powerful, they're unique. And so I don't think we can say that he's just a prophet. So if you want to study more, Mark 14:62, but I don't want the series to be about the Bible. So let's talk about the Quran. This is Surah 20, the first one we're going to talk about, pronounced Taha, Surah 20, Taha. It was written in the Meccan period, and it contained...
Now, in English, of course, it's quite interesting how to write it in English, right? Because it's a different meaning if you say ta and to in Arabic, right? Because it's different letter, ta and to. I don't know how to write on screen, right? But if you write in English ta, so normally people will just pronounce ta, right? Which is a different letter than to. So that's quite interesting, how to, write something from Arabic words that are quite similar to other tongue, but it's actually different meaning.
It's a lengthy account of the story of Moses. Regardless of that, I wanted to focus on verse 8. Verse 8 says this. It says, God, Allah, in this context, there is no God but He. Unto Him belong the most beautiful names. Unto God belong the most beautiful names. And so this...
Okay, so just to read. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Allahu la ilaha illahu lahul asma'ul husna. So that's verse 8.
The most beautiful names, that really stuck out to me. And so from there, I Googled this list of names. What are the names of Allah? I think some people say there's 99 names of Allah. So I don't know if all those come from the Quran or the Bible or a combination. But Allah is said to have these titles, these things that He is called. For example, the Almighty, or the Bestower of Mercy, or the Creator, or the Truth. And so Allah has these names that this must be referring to those names, the 99 names that are reserved for Allah. And so my question, or the thing that popped into my mind when I was reading this list, is I noticed that a lot of these titles are also in the Bible, but they're also in the Gospel being applied to Jesus, or they're in the New Testament being applied to Jesus. And so I was tempted to, again, try to argue with all these verses, but I want this to be about the Quran. I genuinely do. So my question from here is simply this. If, I'm not even saying this happened, I'm just saying if Jesus used one of Allah's most beautiful names for Himself, would you believe He is God? If Allah, so one of these beautiful names reserved for Allah, if Jesus used one of these names and referred to himself as that, would you accept that he is God? Or would you accept that he is the Son of God in a unique sense, making himself equal to God in some way? Now,
What he's saying, the second part, is quite interesting because that anyone who believe that would believe actually there's two entity of God, right? Anyway, two things about that question. One, how do you get what Jesus have said, right? If you are implying that looking at the Bible, so there's a proving first that need to be that is required, that prove it to me that I can trust that the Bible actually have an accurate account of Jesus. That's number one. I haven't had that until now. I don't think, but you know, it's just a challenge, because before we say that, oh, Jesus says this, first, you know, this text, how reliable it is. Can you show that it is at most reliable? Number one. Number two, if you look at most or many names in the Asma'ul Husna, the beautiful names, many of those words can be used for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's except that Allah said al-hajj, al-qayyum, okay, al-malik, right, ar-rahman, ar-rahim, because some of the name, in terms of the meaning itself, that no creation have it, but many of those 99 names, you know, to a lesser degree, people have mercy, people have something like that, right? So those word without putting al, the, right, the, meaning, so the most high, when you have al, the implication, right? Without that al, without that the most high, the most merciful, the most, you know, for example, you know, I have mercy or anything, the sifat, it doesn't really make you to claim to be, because this discussion essentially is many of the 99 names people use as when they name their children, right? Some of the names is being used, so is it okay or not? So in terms of the discussion, is some of the words, in terms of the meaning itself, you cannot say that any creation have it, but many of the names, just the origin words, it can be applied to including humans, so not a problem. So even Jesus reflect I am merciful or anything, it doesn't have any implication unless he says I'm the most merciful, the most benevolent, or anything that can only be attributed to God.
Now, obviously, it'd be different if I used one of these names. Let's say I call myself the bestower of mercy. That's a name for Allah. Let's say I call myself the bestower of mercy. You're probably just going to not listen to me, or you're going to call me a heretic, or you're going to say that I'm being disrespectful or something like that. But if Jesus calls himself the bestower of mercy, how would you respond to that? Because you in my mind, you can't accept him as a prophet, right? No prophet would use these names that are reserved for Allah for himself. It would seem we would have to condemn him as a prophet. So from that point, you would either have to conclude that he's just a man, or that he's actually God. Maybe he's using this title for himself, which is reserved for Allah, because he is actually God, which is what I, as a Christian, believe. So I want to know, if Jesus, these most beautiful names reserved for God, reserved for Allah, if Jesus used one of them to refer to himself, what would be your first thought? What would be your reaction? Would you still accept him as a prophet? Would you just say, no, there's no way he made that claim? Would you then just try to doubt the Bible from there? Would you say that he must be just a man, I have to ignore him as a prophet? Or what would convince you that he is God? Like maybe he does, well, I think he absolutely makes these claims. And I think he uses titles that are reserved for Allah. For example, one, I said I wasn't going to give examples, but it would make sense to give an example. In the Quran, 22 verse 6, Allah is called the truth. And then in John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the truth. And so Allah is referred to as the truth. That's one of his beautiful names. And Jesus also calls himself the truth. So I'm curious to note, how do you respond to these claims of Jesus?
My response is, first, how can I know for sure that that is exactly what Jesus said? Because I don't trust. I don't really know who wrote this and how they get his you know, his information, etc. Right? So those question marks render this question really just hypothetical at best.
Or if you accept that Jesus makes one of these claims, how do you respond? What do you do with that? Would you accept that he was a man? Would you still say he's a prophet? Would you accept him as God? Where would you go from there? So that was my observation / question from Surah 20. Taha. as we go to Surah 21, pronounced Anbiya, Surah 21, al-Anbiya.
So it's quite interesting because, of course, he just picked up what he resonates with him most, I guess, because Surah Taha have a quite interesting story with regard to Moses and Fir'aun, and I'm interested if a Christian read those, how do they see it compared to the story of Moses and Pharaoh in the Bible, right? Because those kind of things, but of course every people would be triggered with different points, I guess, depending on where they are, what are their interests, what are their motivation, etc., right? So yes, him so far until this 7th episode tend to want to pit the Bible, and one, of course, from the Christian point of view, he demand or he expect people to put the Bible as a yardstick or benchmark, hence the Quran have to fulfill or something fit into what the Bible have already established. So yeah, that's his point of view. But I'm interested because the Christian that I've seen before that really analyzing, because they are not sure, Christianity and Islam. So the way they analyze things is a bit different. For example, the stories are different, then they would go into it. But so far, I haven't seen it from Dex yet. I think because the point of view that he have is very different. It's not evaluating, seeking the truth. He is so sure that Christianity is the truth. And when he go to the Quran, it's not evaluating the truth in there. It's just comparing with the truth that he know, I think, right? So that's how it is different with other Christians that I have seen before.
Yeah, al-Anbiya. This surah was written in the Meccan period. It gets its name from all of the prophets mentioned throughout it. In verses 16 through 29, it talks about the absurdity of God having a child. Seems to be talking about Christianity again here. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts on the Son of God, then I just talked about them at the beginning of this video, or check out the last episode, episode 6, to hear more about this idea of Jesus being the Son of God. But I want to focus in this surah, I want to focus on verse 30. So this is Surah 21, verse 30, and I want to talk about scientific miracles in the Quran. I haven't talked about this yet, so I'm excited. So this verse says, "Have those who disbelieve not considered that the heavens and the earth were sewn together, and we rent them asunder, and we made every living thing from water? Will they not then believe? Will they not then believe?" So this verse is talking about non-believers, those who disbelieve. And now I agree with the premise of this verse. Some of the commentaries I read, some of the tafsirs that I looked at, said that this verse is pointing out, hey, it's absurd to not believe in God. If you don't believe in God, look at the world around us. Look at the created world. Look at the natural world. It points us to the existence of God. And I totally agree with that. I don't think disbelieving in God makes any sense. Clearly there is a God. Clearly there's some type of intelligent creator out there. Then, within this verse, some Muslims argue that there's two scientific claims in this verse. The first one being the heavens and the earth were sewn together and we rent them asunder, which is basically the heavens and the earth were sewn together. They were together at one point, and then they were sort of ripped apart at some point by God. So some Muslims will argue this is a scientific miracle because this is talking about the Big Bang Theory, the origin of the cosmos, the origin of the universe. And the second scientific claim being made in this verse is that Allah made every living thing from water. So I wanted to talk about this idea of scientific claims. Some of you have said, how could I know that the Quran is true? Well, if you look at the scientific claims, there was no way that Muhammad would have this scientific knowledge. Therefore, he must have gotten this from God. And so here's what I want to say about this. It is possible for scientific claims in the Quran to persuade me that it has a divine origin. But these scientific claims would have to be impressive. They would have to be really impressive. What I mean by that is that they would have to be specific and new. Specific and new. So if there's a verse in the Quran and it's just sort of a vague general claim scientifically, then it's hard to take it seriously, right? It's not very impressive if it's just like a vague idea. It has to have a specific scientific detail within it. And then the second part of this is these claims have to be new, meaning if we saw these scientific miracles earlier in history, before the time of Muhammad, then it's not impressive that Muhammad is saying them because perhaps Muhammad heard about these miracles elsewhere or heard about these scientific ideas elsewhere. So for a scientific claim to be serious or a scientific claim to be counted as a miracle, as miraculous, it would have to be specific and it would have to be new. And I do think that would persuade me. With that being said, let me comment on these. So,
okay, on the criteria, fair enough. However, in the sense of, because this scientific claim, it's difficult to say that it is a scientific claim because the scientific aspect of it is only found out or discussed recently in history, right? Prophet Muhammad SAW never used on any of the verse and say that look at the scientific discovery, right? It's more of like what is observable back then and can be appreciated back then when the scientific discoveries is not yet in the reality. Hence the Quranic verse is, in a way, Allah have made it as such that it can be appreciated and not seem like what is this, and a claim that can only be verified, meaning a specific claim that can be only verified 1,000 years later. It doesn't come as such, while at the same time the verse itself can be understood later by the people when the time comes to have implied all of those, directly implied all of those, and can be discussed at that time, right? So it is in that way. So with his two criteria, the first one would be difficult. I don't think you would have anything like that in the Quran, because that would mean you want to say that, for example, water is from H2O, something like that, right? It's very specific demand. There would never be a Quranic verse like that, because then for like 1,000 years or more from the time of Prophet Muhammad until it will become some weird verse that doesn't make sense, doesn't fit people. So yeah, that's number one. Number two, many of the scientific, including this, is new meaning that it is not discussed, is not found during the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's only found 1,000 years later, right? So on that part, normally Muslim would not argue that much, but for the first criteria about it being specific, as is like a specific equation, something like that, obviously in the Quran you will not find that.
From this verse, the first part of this, the heavens and the earth were sewn together and then we rent them asunder. They were sort of torn apart. This claim to me scientifically is not impressive, because first of all, it's not specific. It's not a very specific claim. It's saying that heavens and the earth at some point were sort of together and then they were torn apart. But to the people who say that this is the Big Bang Theory, or this is referring to the origin of our universe, that's actually not true. And I got this from Muslims, by the way. I studied this a little bit more, and some Muslim apologists point out this verse, it's not talking about the Big Bang Theory. It's not talking about a singularity and then the universe popping into existence. It's already saying that the heavens and the earth exist. They already exist. They're already sewn together, and then God tears them apart. So this verse actually isn't talking about the origin of the universe. It's just talking about the heavens and the earth already existing together and then being torn apart. It's not even making that scientific claim. And also, this idea isn't new. This idea is seen in Genesis. The heavens and the earth were combined, and then God separated them. So Muhammad didn't get this. This idea wasn't new. He didn't start this idea. We see this idea in Genesis. There's other creation accounts out there from other religions that have a similar idea. So this, as a scientific claim, isn't very impressive overall. Now, the next one is a little bit more impressive, and we made every living thing from water. Now, that is more specific, right? That's more testable, this idea that all living things come from water. My honest thoughts on this is, first of all, to let you guys know, you can probably already tell, science isn't really my realm. Like, I'm more of a philosophy guy. I'm more of a history guy. I don't really care about science too much. So I don't know that scientists would disagree or agree with this, that every living thing comes from water. Intuitively, it makes sense, because I have a lot of water in me. You have a lot of water in you. Some people say we're like, 80%, 90% water. So that makes sense. But I don't know enough about the science to know that, like, would scientists really agree with that? I'm not sure. I have to look into it more. And also, I don't know that this idea is new. So if this idea, every living thing coming from water, if that didn't exist in the 7th century at all, then yes, I think this claim would be impressive. Because it is a little bit more specific, but it would still have to be new, and also science would have to agree with this idea, which I have to look into more, because again, I'm not really a science guy. But the idea of scientific claims being miraculous and showing us that the Quran is a divine origin, I like that this is more testable. I've talked about the test of imitability, and I just don't think it's very persuasive, because I think it's kind of vague, it's kind of general, it's a little subjective, and so I don't think it's a very good test. But scientific claims would be way more subjective, way more objective. They just have to be specific and new. And lastly, to take this.
Okay, so the what was I was thinking something. Yeah, okay. The thing about the demand of proof, right? Because regardless of what he said, what he said, taking all of those into account, at least it is a sign to dig in more. It's a sign that because if you think about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially when you know his history and his reality, right? So that's a question, right? Where did he get all of this from? And this is just one instance, right? And if you stack all of those, even when he said that a vague one, right? But if you stack all of those that is being said in the Quran, and you say that simultaneously, coincidentally, all of these, the vague one or the more specific one, you stack all of those, come from Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this person that couldn't have known any of those, or most of those at least, that is a sign already to say that there's something here. I should discover more, I should research more, right? So that should be enough to start a journey, at least, at the very least.
Video home, Surah 22, al-hajj, al-hajj. So immediately I recognized hajj because I know I believe it's the fifth pillar of Islam. This idea that once in your life, or multiple times, if you're able, visit the, what's it called? I forgot. Mecca. Go to Mecca and visit the Kaaba. And so the fifth pillar of Islam is to take this journey, hajj, take a pilgrimage to Mecca to visit the Kaaba and the holy sites. So anything else about that? One thing I found in my study Quran is that this pilgrim.
Now, the way he mentioned it, it's not really a visit, right? But of course, I can get it from the perspective of, layman's term, visit. But just visiting is not the same as performing the Hajj.
This idea of the Hajj, they say, is found in Abraham. They tie it all the way back to Abraham and Abraham's life and something that he demonstrated. So this idea of it's not new in Islam. Islamic theology would say. They would say that it goes all the way back to Abraham, this idea of taking this pilgrimage to holy sites. And so at some point in your life as a Muslim, I know that it's a goal or that it's a command to visit Mecca, to visit the Holy Land. And so my only question for you guys as we close this video is simply this. Have you journeyed to Mecca? Have you taken the Hajj? I don't know if...
Those two are not the same, right? Like I mentioned. Now, have I, if the question is answered by me, right? Have I journeyed to Mecca? Yes. Have I done the Hajj? No. Because I went for my Umrah. And I'm still waiting to go for my Hajj, right? So because the Hajj is not just going to the Mecca, not just the ritual in the Hajj, there's a specific time in the year that you can do it. It's not just I can schedule to perform my Hajj at any given time. No. For Umrah, yes. Any given time, you just go there, perform your Umrah. I have done that. But so again to the question, I have journeyed to Mecca, but have never or not yet performed my Hajj. So make dua for me, inshallah, to be made easy to perform my Hajj. Hopefully soon, inshallah.
If Muslims go multiple times in your life, I don't know if it's a rare thing. Like I know it's expensive to travel to be able to go there. And so where are you at in life? Are you younger? Are you older? Have you been able to take the Hajj? Have you been to Mecca multiple times, one time? What was your experience like?
Now, just to put in context the reality of Malaysia, especially Malaysia, I think. I'm not sure about Indonesia. I think it's quite similar, but I haven't never seen the detail, right? For Malaysia, because of, we are a Muslim majority country. And to go to Hajj, right, the current reality, right, because we have to enter Saudi Arabia, and to make things in organized way, I guess, Saudi Arabia have divided the quota from each, those who want to perform Hajj. There's a quota from each country. And basically for Malaysia, it's because of the quota and the sheer number of Muslims that want to go there, we have schedule, right? So when I enter the schedule, or for example, my children, right now, they are still children, I go and to start queue, because it's better to start queue early. They would have to wait from now until I think 40, 50 years before the queue come up, right? So because the amount of people allowed to go each year and the amount of people requesting is so mismatched that the queue is like taking like 50 to 100 years before your queue comes. That's the reality of Malaysia. So it's quite interesting for many Malaysian students that study abroad and going to Hajj from abroad, because the quota is rarely filled, perhaps, or it's easier to get the quota from other countries. So many people benefit from that, where they are studying even in the Western countries. To go to Hajj from there is much easier than to go from Malaysia, where you have to queue for 50 years.
I would just love to hear about your journey, all in all. Personally, I have been to the Middle East. I've been to Israel once when I was 18 years old. It was kind of a cool graduation trip, and it's hot. It is hot. The weather is really hot. I went to the Dead Sea. It was like 120 degrees out, and the water was like a hot tub, basically. But it was cool seeing all these holy sites, seeing the Sea of Galilee and Jerusalem and the road to Damascus and things like that. But my question for you is simply, have you journeyed to Mecca? I'd love to hear about that. With that being said, let's take us home. So if you enjoyed this video, if you're enjoying the series, Christian Reads Quran, please drop a like, keep on subscribing. I would love to get to 5,000 subs by episode 10. I don't know why, but I do. Like, that just popped in my head. Like, that'd be cool. So let's go.
Okay, so I think, is there any more?
5,000 subs. Make sure to like and subscribe. And the last thing I would say is, I'm going to be out of town for the next couple weeks. Next week, I'm going on a mission trip to Mexico.
Okay, so yeah. So he have a mission trip, etc. So yeah, as I have said, he is not someone who is searching for the truth. He is so totally convinced, I think, from what he's sharing, right, that is Christianity, and he is also involved in missionary missions, etc. Hence, that's why the perspective when he see the Quran is a bit different than any other Christian that I've watched so far that is actually evaluating and seeking the truth, right? Anyway, to the number of subscribers, etc. I think it's normal for those who have done YouTube videos to, even though the original mission not to, care that much about numbers, but you are affected by, meaning when you are on any social media, the design is trigger you to be affected that how can I improve the count number of views, subscribers, etc. Right? So that's interesting. And for me myself, of course, I cannot say that I have never been affected by the numbers. Meaning, when I log in, I can see, and I can see how much increment or decrease of number of subscriber views, etc. from previous days, etc. Right? So it's very hard to not be affected, to say frankly, right? Even though Alhamdulillah for some time I have managed to diffuse or something from being too affected by, for example, why no one watching my videos, for example. I used to be affected some way, but now it's just that's why the way I do it is I push many different type of videos, including those who I do expect will never get views anyway, and you can see throughout my list of videos there are those type of videos, for example, in my own language, etc., that I know. Yeah, so that train myself to, I want to distance myself from being caught up in any numbers things. Anyway, we'll talk about that in different separate videos, I guess. Thank you for watching. See you next time.